everybody, and welcome to another fantastic session for Commercial Print Day at the FuturePrint Virtual Summit. We've seen thousands of delegates join us for these sessions across the 5 days. And I'm now very happy to introduce to you Mark Hinder, who is currently at Ricoh, who's responsible for business development in commercial print and his inkjet business, and also Andy Martinello, who is the head of growth innovation solutions at Strategyzer. Mark has had an incredible history in the print industry, started off working at Xerox, then on to Konica Minolta, before now finding his way to Ricoh. Personally, me and Mark have bumped into each other a lot over the years at trade shows and exhibitions, and one thing he knows a huge amount about is the print industry and the technology that underpins it, but most importantly, how you can make money from that technology, diversify your business, and grow for the long term. Andy, meanwhile, is a very, very interesting personality in his sector. He works with global sales and marketing teams to create awareness of Strategizer's suite of world-class tools, which are really designed to help drive strategy and innovation through technology, learning, and coaching. They are a really important company, and one that is becoming so much more important for businesses, particularly in this era of COVID-19, when everybody is really having to reevaluate how they deliver value to their customers so that they can grow in the long term. So Mark and Andy really have that in common. So just to give you a little bit of an overview of this session before I hand over to Mark, the changing demands for printed products are affecting all aspects of the industry, placing real pressure on print companies to quickly adapt their business models. This raises questions such as how to model new business concepts, to target new customers, and plan for investments will be covered. Ricoh, in this case from Mark, will be joining Andy, who will explain how print companies can adapt their business concepts using these tools from Strategyzer, which has benefited from many companies across the different industry types, and is certainly something that our own industry in commercial print can learn from. So without further ado, over to you, Mark.
Thanks so much, Brendan. And yes, we do have a long history of working together on projects like this, and I'm really pleased to be here to explain a little bit about what we're doing and what we're doing with Strategyzer, and I'll come on to that during the presentations. But before we do that, we've got to reflect on the trading climate that we're in at the moment. And the feedback that we've been getting, for instance, in some of the customers and some of the accounts that we deal with, COVID has had such a dramatic impact that, we've seen revenue go down by 50%, and it's really impacting on cash flow. And they're coming under severe pressure. If we then look at it from a planning point of view, print companies are now forced to adjust their business plans. And they've got to look for new markets, they've got to look for new customers, and they've got to look, importantly, for new business opportunities. That means that then when it comes to marketing, yes, they see this as a priority, but the ability to create and deliver effective marketing has been really challenging. And in some cases, they're not doing any marketing at all. So some of the challenges that they're being faced with is, if we look at online, there has been online growth in sales, web to print, but many of the e-commerce platforms that are out there are still struggling to capitalize due to poor user experience, and again, the increasing competition that's now starting to come through with online web to print businesses. Again, if you look at marketing, how are they going to create and deliver effective new marketing approaches where, for instance, your audience may not be in the office? So direct mail, etc., where it potentially was going to a user who would have been in that office, how are you going to make sure that those mail pieces are going to reach the endpoint person? And that's really causing a lot of discussions and dilemma right now. Then you look at it from a cost structure. How to ensure that all of your costs are covered and cash is generated, the key issue. So if we carry on and we look at it now from a business models point of view, many print companies' business models were not ready for the impact of COVID and the acceleration of digitization that's happened as a result. That's meant that business models are being forced to adapt, and understanding the impact then on sales and the ability of salespeople to generate income is absolutely paramount. And if we then look at transactional selling is really only benefiting those companies with the most efficient cost structures. So moving on, where we look at the sales challenges, it's challenging times. Many print companies rely on relationships. So with limited access to customers and no face-to-face contact, that's proving a real challenge. If we look at it then, print salespeople have now got to adapt as well. They've got to start to get used to using Zoom, Microsoft Teams, web calls, etc. The things that we're doing right now on this session. And effectively, print buyers are coming under huge pressure. Budgets have been slashed and more pressure to purchase on price. Managing those engagements is becoming really harder. So realistically, we've got to get used to less print, but not less digital print. And we really believe right now that there is a huge opportunity for print companies to capitalize on the outcome, the opportunities that COVID is going to bring. Now, that means we've got to build the case for investment, stronger business models. But how do you do that? How do you actually create a stronger business model? And that's why I'm really pleased to be announcing a new partnership that Ricoh is going to be offering to its customers on this session. And I'm joined today by Andy Martinello from Strategyzer, where we're going to take you through a journey of how you can build those new business models. So, and it's exciting times for Ricoh as we partner with Strategyzer and incorporate their approaches and their tools into what we do. So I'm going to hand over to Andy now.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate that. Great introduction. So thank you so much for having me here. It's absolutely my pleasure to be presenting to this conference and talking to you folks about turning ideas into growth engines. And Mark, as you spoke about, the importance of evolving business models is paramount for everybody. People around the world in a variety of different roles are absolutely dialed into the notion that it is critical to look at your business model and think about innovation. But the reality is that it's really hard to do, right? And when we think about where we show up typically in business is we start by focusing on our core business, right? This is what we refer to as the exploit portfolio. This is what got us to where we are today. This is the business model that we use to generate all of our core business. And then if we look at the other end of the scale, we think about innovation. So this is how we look at new ways to bring, to explore ideas and then generate those into core business models, into core growth engines. And the reality is that is a complicated process. It looks a little bit like this, a lot of sort of backwards and forwards, a really messy process before it finally balances out and turns into one of our core growth engines as we go through that process of searching net new ideas and generating core growth engines. Now, a thing to keep in mind is that there's nothing wrong with really focusing on the core business. There's often this understanding that, hey, if you're not really immersed in innovation, then you're not really doing it. If you're not thinking about things in a transformative way, then it's not innovation. And it's not true. Mark, you talked about the print industry and how it needs to shift, but it's not necessarily a requirement to look at something that will absolutely revolutionize the world of print or anything along those lines. Now, it's definitely part of the conversation, and it can be, but in fact, when we think about innovation, we actually think about three types of innovation moving through that continuum of explore to exploit. And they show up in this way. We start with efficiency innovation. This is really core to the existing business model. And then there's sustaining innovation, and then we move into transformative innovation. Let me bring in an example to help really clarify this. So Amazon is a terrific example of this. When we think about efficiency innovation in Amazon, we think about how they automated their warehouses. A terrific example of a real shift, but really embedded in their existing business model, right? So we all see efficiency as consumers in the way that when we place an order through Amazon, we have things coming faster, fewer errors, and so on. An example of sustaining innovation at Amazon can be the Kindle, right? So it's adjacent to the core business model, right? Helps them sell more ebooks, which is an important part of what they sell. And then, of course, it generates a new revenue line by actually including devices into the story, but it's sustaining the existing business model. And then, of course, when we think about transformative, and many of you probably already arrived at this, we think about Amazon Web Services. So a completely new business model. So this is an enormous example of really moving from efficiency to full-on transformation. But again, keep in mind that each element is just as important and can have huge impact in your business. So how do we do it? Well, we start by talking about business design, and business design starts with an idea, right? Some form of ideation. And then we prototype. This is the back of the napkin thinking. We want to talk about a business model. And then we assess, what is the strength of this business model? And a lot of organizations make a mistake of stopping at this loop. And we introduce this thought to say, it's absolutely critically important to say, you can't stop there. You need to introduce the element of testing. So you create this loop going from design to testing, and within testing, you then extract what you believe to be true about your business model, you run experiments, and then you learn from that, and then potentially continue to loop through each time making better and better decisions. Because fundamentally, this process is all about de-risking innovation before you invest money, and you do that by being able to make better decisions. So let's get into some of the tools, kind of moving beyond the concept. And we start with the business model canvas. And I want to bring in this explainer video to help introduce the business model canvas.
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of the business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the business model canvas, a tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. The channels describe through which touchpoints you're interacting with customers and delivering value. Customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. The key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. Key partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. Then once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the business model canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
Okay, so a real quick introduction. Let's bring it to life by talking about an example. And specifically, I want to talk about Google Search. So what's the business model for Google Search? Well, of course, the value proposition is finding information. The customer segment is everybody, right? All of us, most of us use Google Search. The channel is the URL wherever you are in the world. And the customer relationship is automated. And what we mean by that is, excuse me, that there's no one-to-one relationship. Nobody's going to answer your call if you have a Google search issue, whatever that might look like. It's going to be through some form of chatbot or social media or so on. And of course, revenue is zero, right? We don't pay to search. On the back end of the business model canvas, so this is now getting into the mechanics, lots of stuff happening, right? So from an engineering perspective in the software and the network, those are the key activities. The key resources, of course, are the algorithms and patents. These are things that are highly protected, of course, by Google, and that is a major resource that they have. A key partner, of course, is the internet, and then all the costs that are associated with generating that. So that is the first iteration of the Google Search business model. Of course, Google is a multi-sided business model because it doesn't stop there. This is a great example of having an existing resource that you then introduce into the business model to try to build out. So the resource they have, of course, is traffic. This enables them to introduce a new customer segment, which is advertisers. The value proposition for them is the reach to us, to the audience. The channel is the Google AdWords. Customer relationships remain automated. And then now we're definitely talking about a revenue stream, right? Google makes an enormous amount of money through the keyword auctions, and that is a critical provider. It doesn't stop there. They go into adding the key activity of developing an operating system, right? So that's the activity that they do. The resource they have is the operating system and all the costs that are associated. It adds value for both the users and the advertisers by introducing a mobile platform, and they partner with device manufacturers as well as sell to them. And then the value proposition is the operating system. Once again, zero revenue, but the story doesn't stop there. Now we're looking at a new channel, right? Because we've introduced Android Mobile, the Google Play Store, which is pointed at us, enables a new customer segment, which is app developers, who then, of course, have the value proposition of accessing us. And then Google gets a 30% transaction cut. So here's an example of a very complex business model really laid out in whatever that took me 60 seconds to introduce. And that is one of the magic pieces of the business model canvas. Always remember, and you heard in the introductory video, that it's not enough just to enumerate, right? It's not just about going through and using this as a checklist. It really is a storytelling device. And if you're not able to show the flow and the connection between all of the different parts, then you're not using the business model canvas to its full capacity. So here's an example of how you can do that. Now, the creators of the business model canvas, the folks that I work with, Alex Osterwalder, who's the originator of the tool, along with Yves Penieur, his partner, and the rest of the team, when they developed the tool, it was certainly to do this, is to show a way as to how you create value for the organization. And as they're out there in the world using the tool and running workshops, they noticed that individuals were really over-indexing on these two areas, the value proposition and the customer segment, which makes sense, right? Because there's so much complexity in both of those elements, the value that you bring and the multiple customer segments and so on. So that triggered them to sit back and say, well, we need to create another tool. And out of that, drilling down specifically into the value proposition and the customer segment, they created the value proposition canvas, which is intended to do this, is really narrow in on the customer profile, understand how do you bring value to that customer profile, and where do you explore fit. Let's get another little quick video going here to introduce the canvas.
Every day, companies design products and services to improve their customers' lives. But 72% of new product and service innovations fail to deliver on expectations. This means that customers don't care about 7 out of 10 new products introduced to the market. It doesn't have to be this way. Just like you create value for your business with a business model canvas, there is in fact a tool to intentionally visualize, design, and test how you create value for customers. It's called the Value Proposition Canvas. The Value Proposition Canvas is composed of 2 parts, the customer profile and the value map. With the customer profile, you describe the jobs your customers try to get done. Jobs can be functional, like getting from A to B, social, like impressing friends and colleagues, or emotional, like gaining peace of mind. You highlight your customers' pains, which annoy customers while trying to get a job done. Pains are negative outcomes that customers hope to avoid, like dissatisfactions with existing solutions and challenges, frustrations, risks, or obstacles related to performing a job. And you outline customer gains, which describe how customers measure the success of a job well done. Gains are positive outcomes that customers hope to achieve, like concrete results, benefits, and even aspirations. Use the customer profile to visualize, test, and track your understanding of the people or companies you intend to create value for. It's a map that becomes clearer the more you learn about your customers. The second part of the canvas is the value map. With it, you list the products and services your value proposition builds on. You describe in which way these products, services, and features are pain relievers, how they eliminate, reduce, or minimize pains customers care about, making their life easier. And you outline in which way they are gain creators, how they produce, increase, or maximize outcomes and benefits that your customers expect, desire, or would be surprised by. The value map makes explicit how your products and services relieve pains and create gains. Use it to design, test, and iterate your value proposition until you figure out what resonates with customers.
You achieve fit by creating a clear connection between what matters to customers and how your products, services and features ease pains and create gains. Great value propositions target essential customer jobs, pains and gains and do so extremely well. Your customer profile may contain countless jobs, pains and gains, but your value map highlights which ones you intend to focus on. But don't forget, an outstanding value proposition can still fail if your business model is flawed. Successful companies embed outstanding value propositions in scalable and profitable business models. Use the value proposition canvas to create products and services that customers want. Get started at Strategyzer.com.
Google, you will find both of those videos out on YouTube. So that is always available for your reference. Now, we've talked about the business design. Now let's shift over to testing. And so one of the areas, one of the considerations that we take into this is the mindset of testing like you're wrong. So when we think about design, no constraints, right? Be as creative as you want. Build the most radical business models in the world. It doesn't matter. As long as when you move into the testing phase, you test like you are wrong. You want to assume that your assumptions are incorrect. So let's talk a little bit about how we do that. We start by extracting hypotheses. Now, let's go back to the business model canvas. We talked about the value proposition, of course, being central. When we think about the customer relationship segments and channels, we create this metaphor of the theater. So it's everything that's front stage. This is how we're reaching out into the market. And when we consider the elements that are happening here in the front stage, we think about the way that we're at risk in terms of innovation. And the first thing that comes, the first type of innovation risk that we want to consider is desirability. So do people want it, whatever it is that we're looking to build? Then, of course, behind the curtain is backstage. Now we bring in the innovation risk of feasibility. Can we do it? If people want it, can we do it? Then, of course, there's the profit formula. This is what everything sort of stands on. And this helps us understand the viability. Can we actually deliver this? Is this something that we can sustain? And then there's a fourth element, and that's called adaptability. So is the environment right for the business model that we're looking to create? Is the timing right? What factors, and of course, we have a lot of examples in the world today, might come to bear, excuse me, to impact our business model. So those are the considerations that we want to keep in mind as we go into extracting hypotheses from our business model. Now, the fundamental nature of a hypothesis is to understand what would have to be true for our idea to work. And the process is you walk around your business model, again, through each of the lenses of desirability, feasibility, viability, and adaptability, and start your hypotheses by saying, we believe that, and then you fill in the blank. Here's a quick example. A bank that is looking to digitize its offering might say this, right? So we believe that this particular generation prefers the efficiency over mobility over the traditional space. That's a desirability hypothesis. And we believe that we can partner with schools and other spaces where this generation hangs out, and we'll be able to sell through that channel. That's a partnership element, so that's a feasibility hypothesis. We believe that it's going to do this to our bottom line. Of course, that's viability. And that we want to do this globally, so it's important for us to consider the regulations that are happening from country to country. That's an adaptability element, right? So these are examples of hypotheses that we might extract. After we've done that, we've walked all the way around the business model, and we have a list of hypotheses. We want to understand, where are we most at risk and how are we going to drive that risk down? So here's what we do, is we create this assumptions map, and we, in that assumptions map, gain an understanding of where do we have evidence and where do we not, what's important and what is not, what is less important in terms of making this business model come to life. Then we take all of the hypotheses that we've extracted and we plot them across the evidence line, right? Where do we have evidence and where do we not? Then we shift them to understand what's important. And then, of course, our ultimate goal is to zero in on what is the most important element, what are the most important elements of this that we have little to no evidence on, because that, of course, is where we're at the most risk. And so those are the hypotheses that we want to take into our next step. So quick note on what are the characteristics of a good hypothesis as you're writing them. First, it needs to be testable. So at the end of the experiment, are you able to actually show if your hypothesis is supported or refuted, can be validated and invalidated? It needs to be precise. You want to know exactly when, what, and who are you testing in this. You don't want any ambiguity there. And then this is one that often people get caught on, is it needs to be discrete. You can only test one thing at a time. It doesn't mean that you aren't going to run a multiple number of experiments at the same time, but within each experiment, you only want to be testing for one thing, or else your results are going to get complicated. So you got your hypotheses. Now it's time to go out and experiment. And as Steve Blank says, you do need to go out and experiment. There's no answers in the building. You got to get out there. So there's a whole variety of experiments that are possible. Again, you'll find a lot of that on strategizer.com. You can Google it. All kinds of free resources out there for you to download ideas around hypotheses. We also wrote a really good book called Testing Business Ideas that has a list of 44 experiments that might be relevant for you. Quick note on, as you're establishing experiments, of course, evidence is critical, right? You need to have good, strong evidence. So some factors that come to bear. Of course, what people say and do, not the same level of evidence. This is where people get caught a lot. I went out and I asked my customers and they said that they would do this. And so let's go and build it. Not enough. You got to show that they will actually do it. When you're running, the environment in which you're running your experiments is critically important, right? People shift and change if they know they're being watched. Now, lab context can happen anywhere, right? You can be on the street with a camera and people are going to maybe change their answers rather than if you were watching them some sort of surreptitiously without being weird and seeing what they're doing. That might be more impactful, right? Facts definitely always trump opinion, regardless of what's happening in politics these days. And then, of course, investment in time and effort is really what we want to see here, is how much time and effort might your the people that you're experimenting with want to put in. That's a critical element. TestCart also available for free download. This is just a place to now capture all of the work that you're going to do in here. So you take a hypothesis, we believe that. This is the experiment that we're going to do to verify it. Here's how we're going to measure it, and here's how we're going to know that we're right. Those are critical things, right? So we're going to put all of that into the test card, all with the intention, of course, of learning something, right? This is as we're finally closing the loop here. So we've gone out, we've tested, and now we've learned stuff, right? So here's what we do, is we capture, starting with, here's what we believe, this was the hypothesis, here's what we actually observed. So here's the evidence, here's where really the rubber hits the road. We take all of that evidence, and then we establish, well, what did we learn? What are the insights that we gained? Did the evidence support our hypotheses, or did it refute the hypotheses, which is just as valuable, right? Because if this idea isn't going to work, you want to know that as soon as possible so you can move on to something different. We're going to talk about actions in a second. Were the insights unclear, or did we generate new insights? So maybe we did the wrong test for the particular thing that we're looking to experiment on, and so the insights weren't that clear. Or in the process of experimenting, something popped up that we didn't even think about. All of that is going to generate some additional activity. So the intention, of course, is to understand what action do we want to take. Are we going to continue on? We've validated things. We're going to persevere. Do we need to retest because there was some ambiguity or a lack of clarity or new insight? Did the evidence show us that we need to do something slightly different? Or is it time just to shelve this idea altogether? So that is a lightning quick introduction to the design test loop. And again, all of this intended to enable you to make better decisions as you de-risk your investment. That is that loop kind of completed. Thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Mark, I'm going to actually, sorry, Brendan, I'm going to pass it back to you to wrap it up.
So I think what I certainly took away from this tremendous session was seeing the immense collaborative opportunities that our industry has, the commercial print industry and all of the sister industries around it. When our industry collaborates with organizations such as Strategizer, who are across essentially, how do you get the very nub, the essence of what it is that allows your business to add value to its customers' businesses? And that is what our industry struggled with for so long.
Exactly, Brendan. I'm sorry to cut in, but that is why now the passion and the vision that Ricoh has got to partner with Strategizer and bring their tools to market through what we're doing is really important, because right now in these uncertain times, we've absolutely got to be focused on strengthening what we do and how we do it.
Yeah, and it's just so fantastically heartening, because that comment comes from a place where 15 years ago, when I first joined this industry, the OEMs, to a man, weren't part of this conversation very much at all. And now look how far you, our industry leaders, have come in leading the charge to help our industry, our commercial printers, whether they're a small high street business, working with universities and local solicitors, all the way through to the very biggest trade print houses in our industry. Everyone needs to understand this equation. And I just think it's fantastic that, you're collaborating with a group like Strategyzer to make this happen.
Thank you.
So I thank you again, Mark. Thank you again very much, Andy. It's been really insightful. If anyone wasn't taking notes or wants to revisit some of the things in this session, it will be available on replay at the FuturePrint Virtual Summit for the next 2 months. So you can come back, you can recheck it out, rewatch it as many times as you like. If you want to connect with either Mark or Andy, you can do that via their speaker profiles on the website. Also, please do check out both businesses. Incredible. Don't just take the content from here, go and find out what they do. Otherwise, if there's nothing more from you gents, I will say thank you very much for your time. And I will look forward to seeing all of you, our amazing delegates, on the next session for the FuturePrint Virtual Summit.